The alarm on my wrist buzzed twice, which meant the princess was awake and already angry. I had been on this station for 6 hours, and I already understood why every king before me had packed his bags and run. My name is Owen Marsh, and I was not a king, not a prince, not even close to royal. I was a contract soldier who took jobs nobody else wanted, and this job was the strangest one yet. Guard the princess of the Kryn Dominion. Stay close to her. Do not leave her side, no matter what happens. The recruiter who hired me would not tell me why the last 12 guards had quit within a week. He just handed me a contract with more zeros than I had ever seen and told me to sign it before I asked too many questions. I signed it anyway. The doors to her chamber opened before I even touched them, which told me the whole room was wired to watch my every move. Princess Vale stood by a tall window, looking out at a sky full of moving ships, her arms crossed, her jaw tight. She turned to face me, and I felt something strange settle over the room, like pressure before a storm. "You are the new one," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge underneath it, like a blade wrapped in silk. "Owen Marsh," I said. "I was told to guard you." "They all say that," she answered. "Then they leave." I did not know it yet, but those words were the beginning of everything that followed. For the first 2 days, nothing unusual happened. She was sharp with her words, quick to test me, quick to see if I would flinch. I did not. I had faced worse than a cold princess, with a bad reputation. I had faced burning transport ships, and silent battlefields, where the only sound was my own breathing. A few sharp words were nothing. On the 3rd day, everything changed. I was standing near the entrance to the royal hall when the pressure hit me. It came without warning, like a wave crashing over my chest, squeezing the air out of my lungs. My vision blurred at the edges. I heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, faster and faster, and beneath it, something else, something that was not mine. Grief, rage, loss so heavy it felt like the floor was tilting under my feet. 2 guards near me dropped to their knees, gasping, their faces pale as ash. A servant carrying a tray of drinks collapsed against the wall, the glasses shattering around her. I turned toward the source of it and saw Princess Vale standing perfectly still in the center of the hall, her hands pressed against her temples, her eyes shut tight. Every instinct in me said to step back, to get away from whatever was happening, but something else, something stubborn and quiet, told me to stay exactly where I was. I walked toward her instead of away from her. "Vale," I said, using her name without any title, which I was told never to do. "Look at me." She opened her eyes, and for a moment, I saw something raw and unguarded, something that looked like fear. "You should be running," she whispered. "They always run." "I'm still here," I said. The pressure in the room did not stop, but it did not grow worse either. I stood my ground, breathing slow and steady, forcing my body to stay calm even as my mind screamed that something enormous and heavy was pressing down on it. Slowly the wave began to pull back, like a tide retreating from the shore. The guards around us groaned and pushed themselves back to their feet. The servant against the wall wiped tears from her face and looked around, confused about why she had been crying at all. Vale stared at me like I was something impossible. "How are you still standing?" she asked. I did not have a perfect answer for her that day. I only shrugged and said, "Guess I've got a thick skull." She did not laugh, but something in her expression softened, just slightly, like a door opening a crack. That night, I asked the head of the palace staff, a tall man named Callum Reeve, to explain what I had felt. He hesitated for a long moment before answering. "The princess carries something the healers call the resonance," he said. "It is tied to her mind, to her feelings. When her emotions grow too strong, they spread outward, into everyone close to her. Most people cannot handle it. Their minds are not built to hold that much feeling at once." "Where does it come from?" I asked. Callum's face grew heavy. 10 years ago, her homeworld colony was destroyed in an attack. She was there. She was the only member of her family who survived. The resonance began after that day, and it has never fully faded. I sat with that answer for a long time after he left the room. I thought about all the kings who had come before me, powerful rulers with armies and fleets under their command. Men who could face down entire battle fleets without blinking, yet none of them could stand in a room with a grieving young woman and hold their ground. The next morning, I found her in the garden at the edge of the palace, sitting alone beneath a tree, with leaves the color of pale gold. She did not look up when I approached. "You spoke to Callum," she said. "I did." "Then you know why everyone leaves." I sat down across from her, close enough that she could see my face clearly. "I know why they leave. I don't know why you think I will." She finally looked at me, and there was something guarded in her eyes, something that had been hurt too many times to trust easily. "Because it always happens again. It gets worse before it gets better. Eventually, you will feel what I feel, all of it, and you will not be able to stay. Try me," I said. She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if I was foolish or simply stubborn. Maybe I was both. "You do not understand what you are asking," she said quietly. "Then explain it to me," I answered. "I'm not going anywhere." For the first time since I had arrived, she actually smiled, just a small one, barely visible, but real. Over the following weeks, I stayed close to her, through council meetings, through formal dinners, through quiet mornings in the garden. I learned that the resonance came in waves, sometimes small, barely noticeable, and other times overwhelming, especially when something reminded her of the day her homeworld was lost. I learned to recognize the signs before they happened, the way her shoulders would tense, the way her breathing would grow shallow. I also learned that she was funny, in a dry and unexpected way, and that she loved old star charts, tracing routes to worlds she had never visited. I learned that she read late into the night, because sleep brought dreams she did not want to face. I learned that beneath the fear surrounding her, she was simply a young woman who had lost everything, and was terrified of losing anyone else who got close to her. Word began to spread across the Dominion that the new human guard had lasted longer than anyone else in the princess's service. Other rulers sent messages of disbelief, some polite, some mocking, asking how long I truly expected to last. I ignored most of them. Then came the night of the gathering. The Dominion Council had organized a formal event to honor alliances between several star nations. Kings, governors, and diplomats from a dozen worlds filled the grand hall, each one watching Vale with a mixture of curiosity and caution, waiting to see if this would be the night her resonance finally broke through completely. I stood beside her the entire evening, close enough to offer support without drawing attention to myself. Everything seemed steady, until a diplomat from a rival house, a sharp-featured man named Doran Vex, approached her with a comment meant to wound. "I heard your last guard left within a week," he said, his voice loud enough for others nearby to hear. "How long do you think this one will last before he understands what you truly are?" The room went quiet. I watched something shift in Vale's expression, a flash of old pain rising to the surface, and I felt the pressure begin to build in the air around us, faster than I had ever felt it before. "Doran," I said, stepping forward before he could say anything else. "That's enough." He turned to me with a thin smile. "And what will you do, human? Stand between us?" "If I have to," I said. The pressure in the room grew heavier, sharper, and I saw guests nearby stumble, gripping tables for support. Vale's hands were shaking now, her breathing quick and shallow, her eyes wide with a mixture of grief and panic. "Vale," I said, turning my full attention to her and ignoring everyone else in the hall. "Look at me. Just me." She met my eyes, and I could see the storm building behind them, memories of fire and loss threatening to break free all at once. "I'm right here," I said, keeping my voice steady, calm, unshaken. "I'm not leaving. No matter how hard this gets, I'm staying exactly where I am." The pressure surged one final time, so strong that several guests dropped to the floor, gasping, and even Doran staggered back, his face pale with shock. I held my ground, feeling the weight of her grief pressing against my chest like a physical force, but I did not step back, and I did not look away from her. "Breathe with me," I said. "In, out, slow." She matched my breathing, shaky at first, then steadier, and steadier still. The pressure in the room began to ease, retreating like a wave pulling back from the shore, until finally it faded completely, leaving behind a hall full of stunned faces and a heavy silence. Vale looked at me, tears in her eyes, but for the first time since I had met her, they were not tears of grief alone. There was something else there too, something like relief. "You stayed," she whispered. "I told you I would," I said. Doran straightened himself, clearly shaken, and quickly excused himself from the hall without another word. Other guests slowly returned to their conversations, though many kept glancing toward us with expressions of disbelief. Later that night, after the gathering had ended, Vale found me on the balcony, overlooking the starfield beyond the palace. "No one has ever done that before," she said, standing beside me. "No one has ever stayed through the worst of it." "Maybe they didn't understand what they were looking at," I said. "You're not something to be afraid of. You're someone who survived something terrible and never got the chance to heal properly." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. "The healers say the resonance may never fully fade. It might always be part of me." "That's all right," I said. "It's part of you. It doesn't have to be something everyone runs from. It just has to be something someone is willing to stand beside." She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing something new. "Why do you stay, Owen? Truly. Everyone else who came before you had reasons to run, and better reasons than most to want to." I thought about that question for a moment before answering honestly. Because humans carry a lot of grief too. Wars, losses, things we can't always explain. We've learned how to hold on to pain and keep moving anyway. Maybe that's why what breaks others doesn't break me. I've had practice. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep and real. "Then maybe you were exactly the right person for this." Word of the gathering spread quickly across the Dominion and beyond, carried by diplomats and travelers eager to share the story of the guard who had not run, who had stood firm in the face of the resonance that had driven away kings and rulers from a dozen worlds. Some called it luck, others called it foolishness, but those who had seen it themselves called it something else entirely: courage. In the weeks that followed, the pressure around Vale grew less frequent, and when it did appear, it was smaller, easier to manage. The healers said it might be connected to her own healing, to finally having someone she trusted enough to lean on during her hardest moments. I did not know if that explanation was entirely true, but I did know that she smiled more often, laughed more freely, and looked less like someone carrying the weight of the galaxy alone. One evening, months after my contract had technically ended, I found myself still standing by her side, not because of any payment or agreement, but because I wanted to be there. "You know your contract expired weeks ago," she said, glancing at me with a raised eyebrow as we walked through the garden beneath the golden trees. "I noticed," I said. "And yet you're still here." "I noticed that too," I said, smiling. She laughed, a real and easy laugh, the kind I had not heard from her in the early days of our meeting. "The other kings will hear about this, you know. A human staying beside the princess long after his duty ended. They will have even more reason to fear what they don't understand." "Let them," I said. "They were never brave enough to understand it in the first place." She reached out and took my hand, and for the first time since I had arrived at the palace, the air around us felt light, calm, and completely at peace. Years later, people across a dozen star systems would still tell the story of the guard who never ran, the human who stood firm when kings and warlords fled, the man who chose to stay beside someone everyone else feared. They called it a legend, a tale grown taller with each retelling. But for me, it was never about legends or bravery or fear. It was simply about choosing to stay when staying was the hardest thing to do, and learning that the things which frighten others the most are often just the things that have never been given the patience to heal. And every single day after that, I chose to stay again.